Hello, everyone in Luqman Nation. This is Jackie Luqman.
Another this Shahid Luqman.
And welcome to another episode of Live in Luqman Nation. Live in coffee, current events, and politics in Luqman Nation.
The most dangerous show anywhere. And I mean anywhere.
Anywhere. And we've been everywhere. We've been everywhere
yeah.
the past month.
That's true.
The past month has been really busy for us. Goodness gracious. We've been doing a lot of stuff. There's a lot going on in Luqman Nation. And we're just really excited about all the stuff that's happening.
Yeah, we are excited. I don't know how you do this with these headphones. I can't.
What?
This is really, I feel like a cyborg. Yeah, it's like this weird feel. I'm going to take these out. And hopefully things will get going. But yeah, we had a lot of things that's been happening. I know we haven't seen you guys in a while. You guys haven't seen us in a while.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that we were just resting on our laurels. We were really out trying to doing other things. Jackie was being, Jackie was, doing her thing with the Real News and Sputnik. And I did, I was invited to be on By Any Means Necessary a few days ago. And I felt like the one-legged hooker on the corner that finally got picked up.
Oh my God.
Because I mean, it's like,
beautiful hooker.
Yeah, because it's like, I don't get I don't get asked a lot, to go out. And that's not because people don't like me or anything. It's just because of my work schedule. And Jackie has a little bit more flexibility than I do. So, a lot of times, you see her and you don't see me, and stuff. But look, when you see Jackie, you see me, and vice versa. When you see me, you see Jackie. We are a team, But I was like, when Jackie told me, she said, when you told me, you was like, they said, well, they want you on By Any Means Necessary. I said, oh, they want us? No, they asked for you. And I was
really, all surprised.
Yeah, I really did feel like the one-legged hooker. Like, wow, finally, I got a date, So, but
I don't know why you felt that way, because the segment was great. It is up on our page from earlier this week, By Any Means Necessary, Abdul Shahid Luqman representing. So I don't even know why he feels like that.
So I'd like to shout out to some of you guys out there in Luqman Nation. Scully, how you doing? I'm looking for Uncle Brother and all them to get on soon.
Yeah.
And I understand, guys, look, we haven't went anywhere. It was one of our viewers, sent me a message and said, man, you guys, I'm going to do another video. And yeah, we're going to do another video. And while we at it, let's say that, because we don't have a staff, we haven't yet put our plan together to kidnap some college kid and force them to intern for us.
Chain them in the office.
Yeah. We haven't, put that plan together yet.
Start the stream.
Right. So far, it's just us.
Yep.
And look, I'm no spring chicken. So it's like, with all of these things that we got going on. So, so what we try to do is we try to find a way that, is more convenient for us to do these streams and stuff like that. So this is what we've done, and this is what we came up with. You can now catch the most dangerous show anywhere now on Fridays at this time. We had a staff meeting, which this is staff.
Yeah, Brewski with his input.
Yeah, right. And we just decided that, hey, look, Thursdays is just not, working for us because of, we're busy. And so Friday, this seems to be a better day for us. So this is what we're doing. So now that we got that out of the way, we want, go and get you guys, coffee, and I got my coffee right here.
Yeah, we got our coffee. Right. We got our coffee mugs too.
Right. Now, see, this thing about the coffee real quick is Jackie doesn't like the way I make coffee. See, I got what they call bodega coffee. And if anybody who's from the Northeast, from New Jersey, New York, those areas, you know what I mean. Bodega coffee. You get, in the morning, you go to the bodega, you get a roll, and, butter roll, and you get sweet, like diabetic-induced coffee. It's like, light and sweet, and you sit out there, you wait at a dirty New Jersey transit bus stop to go to work in the morning, choking on smog and cigarettes and stuff like that. Oh God, you gotta love Jersey, man. So anyway, this is what I got. Jackie said, "Well, I'll just take a little bit of it."
Yeah, this is like sugar. This is like a candy bar in a cup. I'm serious. I don't even understand how he drinks this stuff. But look, we had to do this show tonight. We're both kind of tired. It's been the end of a really long week. A lot has been going on.
A lot has been going on. We're gonna get to it right now.
Yeah, we're gonna try to get through as much of this stuff as possible. But really, like the four big issues this week, we think. Obviously, Venezuela. I mean, that's been an issue for longer than this week. The State of the Union address. That's pretty obvious, a huge deal. But also, what is wrong with white people in blackface still?
That's a good question to ask. If there is a white person expert out there and you're on this show, please, we would love to talk to you, because we are this is something that we really want to know. I mean, we really want to know, what is the fascination with white folks in blackface?
But the strain through all of that, and what was my last? And Liam Neeson.
Oh yeah.
But as we were thinking about these four issues this week, we were kind of thinking, you know what? They all have one thing in common, and I don't think a lot of people pay any attention to the one thing they have in common.
What's that?
White supremacy.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, and so let's get into why what we're looking at right now and all of these issues.
It's like underlying theme that goes
It is
throughout.
just the underlying theme. All of this stuff that we're seeing right now, from Venezuela to Liam Neeson, is really just this world just completely ignoring white supremacy and letting it just run amok. And now it's just infected not now that it's infected everything. Now we see the symptoms of this disease that we've been infected with in this world called white supremacy. So let's start with Venezuela. All right. Venezuela is not a new thing. I mean, regime change in foreign countries isn't new. The United States has been doing it since forever.
Well, they have that on their business card. United States,
right.
Yeah.
When Uncle Sam hands out his business card, on the one side it has Uncle Sam and with the American flag, and on the other side, call me for regime change.
Yeah, we do regime changes. Yeah.
We do regime change for oil.
Yep.
And believe us when we tell you that this business in Venezuela has nothing to do with democracy. We talked about this on Loud and Clear today. It was a really great show on Loud and Clear too. Today, and we'll have the link for that show up from today and from earlier this week, from Wednesday after the State of the Union address. When these politicians, I don't care if it's Trump or if it's Pompeo or if it's Bolton or if it's any of the Democrats, because the Democrats have been co-signing this coup in Venezuela. I don't care what these people tell you. Us trying to get rid of Maduro has nothing to do with democracy, has nothing to do with elections being tainted in Venezuela. The International Election Commission has declared that the Venezuelan elections are fair and they were untainted. 6 million people, 6 million Venezuelans voted for Maduro. Right? Not one Venezuelan voted for Juan Guaido. No one. He didn't run at all. But all of a sudden, the United States, specifically Donald Trump, just declares out of the blue that this guy that 80% of Venezuelans had never heard of before, Juan Guaido, just declared him the legal and rightful president of Venezuela. And you got to wonder, well, what is that? What is that about? Where does that come from? So what is that about?
Well, I'm glad you started off. This is not new. United States been undermining Venezuelan democracy for a while, and we know this Chavez. But Chavez was president, became president in 1999. Right. He's basically been there for. I think Chavez died a few years ago. So you're talking about Chavez been there for well over a decade as leader. But during that time, he had a couple of coup attempts that was backed by the United States. And so the irony is this: is the fact that during the time that Chavez and you had this Bolivarian uh, um, um, revolution. Now we got to understand something about Bolivarian, the fact of where the name comes from. And Bolivar was a black African slave who led a revolution in South America.
Come on now.
So the roots go back to a slave revolt, which is one of the which is where Bolivia and Bolivar. This is where they get their name from Bolivar. I can't remember his first name. I think it's Simon or Bolivar, but I can't remember. But he was an African slave that fought a revolt, a revolution. You know, so and you know, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that that's the history of it. So you have So they took on this Bolivar as a means of inspiration. Now, mind you, know the revolution that was taking place in Bolivia, Venezuela, was all about indigenous people.
Right.
Chavez, the brother in Bolivia, and you had the indigenous people who were taking control of the government that were politically asserting themselves after being ruled by white, Spanish,
Western and European imperialist powers and colonial and neo-colonial
but not
powers.
just the powers. The fact that the people who were in charge were white.
Exactly.
They did not represent the native people who were indigenous to the land, and so part of the revolution was that. So we see in Venezuela a return to that. This guy Guaido, white, rooted, Spanish rooted. Here it is. United States is investing. Is basically propping him up and backing him up with the military and everything. You know, so you got this return to white Spanish rule, and not just white Spanish rule, but what all these other revolutions had in common was the first thing they did was they were socialists, which is a bad word here. It's a socialist, but socialist meaning that these indigenous rulers, the leaders, the first thing they did was undercut the corporate interests, Western corporate interests inside their country, and they nationalized the resources because socialism said that this belongs to the people. Exactly. So, of course, to a country like the United States, which has a different ideology, which says that the resources of many belong in the hands of a few,
right?
And we decide what you should get out of it, which most of it is little to nothing. So, of course, the United States can't stand something like this, right on their, as I say, right on in their part of the world. So, with this imperialist domination, one thing we got to remember is that the United States has, when we was talking about AFRICOM, we was talking about all these things militarily, we have to understand that wherever the United States has set up their comm bases to divide the world in these 9 sectors, one of the things that the United States does is that it stamps out any potential rival, or it stamps out any potential nation that could become a rival. In Africa, they got rid of Libya.
Right.
In Africa, because Libya was not only the most developed country in Africa, it was probably the most militarily powerful. So AFRICOM, it would cause a threat to AFRICOM because Libya would still be able to would be able to significantly influence the other nations around it. So the United States couldn't have that. So in order to AFRICOM and do the total submission of these nations around AFRICOM, then Libya got to go.
Right.
Well, we see that in Venezuela. So here you had a revolutionary like Gaddafi, he had to go. Then you see where the United States military went and set up shop in the Middle East. Saddam Hussein had to go.
Right.
So when now it's in South America, and now you see where Chavez died, but you see that with Chavez's legacy and those that was upholding his legacy got to go. Exactly. So all these opposition is a threat to the United States and its imperialism, and it's corporate imperialism. Long as you still have these old leftist revolutionaries around, it's interesting to note that they talk about the failure of socialism. and the U.S. press is very complicit in this because they talk about the failure of socialism. They talk about the destruction of the Venezuelan economy, not being able to provide for its citizens stuff. What they never mention is the fact that the United States weaponized. They weaponized they weaponized the banks.
Yep.
They weaponized the international institutions that caused Venezuela not to be able to conduct business as other nations conduct business. Venezuela's oil, for example. The reason why Venezuela got caught up in the whole thing of not being able to go to the banks because Venezuelan oil is refined in the United States.
Right.
And so some deal that they made out with the United States is the fact that the proceeds from Venezuelan oil being refined here went into American banks.
Right. Are held in American banks.
Are held in American banks. The same thing that happened with Iran years ago.
That's right. You know what I mean? That's right. I mean, that's what the United States does, right? When it provides a part of the of a country's infrastructure that a country can't provide, and we can talk about whatever reasons Venezuela didn't have infrastructure to refine its own oil, but it didn't. The United States refined Venezuelan oil, so the United States could tell Venezuela, well, fine, we'll refine your oil, but you will have to use our banks for to hold the proceeds, to hold your money. Right. The United States and Europe, because now we see the EU doing to Venezuela what the United States did to Haiti 100 years ago. See, 100 years ago, the United States went into Haiti and invaded Haiti and occupied Haiti for decades. But before the United States government did that, it went to I can't remember the name of the bank now, but it's an American bank. Went to the bank where Haiti kept the American bank where Haiti kept its gold and took Haiti's gold. Yeah. 100 years ago.
Right.
Never gave it back. And the United States is doing the same thing right now. Actually, I'm sorry, not the United States. The EU, at the direction of the United States, is doing the same thing by telling the IMF to deny Maduro the right to withdraw his own country's gold. What is the United States and the EU doing with the bank accounts and gold of democratically and legally elected President Maduro's accounts for his country, Venezuela? They're turning it over to Juan Guaido.
Well, but let's look at it this way. It's not Maduro's money.
It's the people of Venezuela's money.
It's the people of Venezuela's money. And we got to understand something, too. When we open up the show talking about white supremacy being the theme throughout what we're going to talk about tonight, and the the real evil nature of white supremacy is the fact that you take, for example, the story about Haiti. So you take the Haitians' means of being able to provide for themselves and stuff, and yet you turn around and blame them for being poor.
Right, right.
And so we tell black people all the time in this country that the same thing white supremacy does with us. They worked our ancestors for free, and after they, the so-called end of legal slavery, then they disenfranchise us all up until this very day, and then have a nerve to turn around and say, well, what's wrong with you people?
Exactly.
So when you're denied opportunities and you don't, and you're denied these things, and then you turn around and blame the victim for being for being poor. So it's the same thing that happened in Haiti, the same thing that's happened in Venezuela. So then you turn around and say, oh no, it's not because we weaponized, we prevented your nation from doing business like any other nation. No, it's socialism that's the problem.
Right.
We had nothing to do with it. It's socialism. Ooh. It's the way that your system is set up. So I don't know if it's whoever set that deal up with the United States and its banks, if that's Chad. I don't think that it was Chavez, which I think that these things probably proceeded.
I do believe
because the way that the relationship that the Chavez administration had with the United States, I doubt that they would have made such a deal like that. I think that a lot of these things preceded it, and like a lot of things, some things that you just can't get out of right away.
Right.
And the United States is very good at throwing so many distractions at you. Like you can't even. It was hard for Chavez or others to really concentrate on providing for their people when you're constantly fighting or fending off attacks by the United States and its allies,
Right.
through all different means.
Right. I mean, people, I think, need to understand that Chavez had several attempts on his life that he always attributed to the United States. The beginning of the collapse of the Venezuelan economy, that was that the private food processing plants. You know, the American politicians make a lot of about the starvation in Venezuela, and you know, you have people who come from Venezuela who say that, you know, well, we were starving, but what people don't ever tell you is that the United States backed these private food processing companies to resist the Bolivarian revolution's reforms under Chavez to nationalize all of the industry so that the state could get the money and distribute it for social programs so the people. The 70% of Venezuela's GDP went to social programs. This is why Maduro could just finish building last year. We put this story up on our page. Mm-hmm. Just finished building almost 3 million housing units, affordable and free housing units for the people of Venezuela. But we've got people freezing to death in the streets.
Well, not just people
in the United States.
I mean, not just people, but the veterans we love.
Right. Well, right. We support the troops, yeah. But we got veterans, homeless. We got students, and freezing to death in the streets. But what people don't tell you about all this, you know, this hunger and starvation in Venezuela is that the United States supported the private food processing companies to resist Chavez's Bolivarian revolution reforms of the economy, and the private companies refused to go along with the nationalization of their businesses. So what they did was they started to hoard food in warehouses. They wouldn't distribute food to the Venezuelan people. So then they blamed that on Chavez and socialism. That was the United States that did that. The sanctions that we talked about, mm-hmm. that the United States imposed on Venezuela after Chavez took mm-hmm. power, and he nationalized formerly private industries, where Venezuela was kept from trading with countries that were friendly with the United States. And then on top of that, countries, the United States would punish countries that traded with Venezuela. This didn't happen under Trump, by the way. I mean, yes, Trump imposed more sanctions, but these sanctions happened under Obama.
Hmm. Well, yeah, they happened under Obama, but they go even further back.
They go farther back, you know, farther back from him, but we don't want to give people the impression mm-hmm. that this is just a Trump problem.
No, well, no, it's not just a Trump problem. Like we said, Chavez got in office in 1999, and so we're looking at a couple of administrations before Trump got in there and everything. One of the things that we have to understand is we have to remember what Malcolm X said, I'm reminded of the way that the media has been, as this media has been, when it comes time to what they call drum beating along with whatever America does. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't care if it's MSNBC, CNN, all the so-called liberal media. They all been playing this role about demonizing Venezuela. And I'm reminded about what Malcolm X said when he said that one of the United States' biggest weapon is the media, is the press, because they can take an innocent person and make them look guilty, mm-hmm. and take a guilty person and make them look innocent. And you see this happen all the time, that the media, instead of informing the American people, Maduro himself made a video directly talking to the American people, and I posted it on my page. A couple of people have posted it, but the American media again is complicit in American imperialism. You know, and I mean these questions are not asked. And we say all the time that the media is corporate owned. I mean, corporations own this. But one of the things that Venezuela has the largest oil reserve. And let's look at the oil. Venezuela has the largest known oil reserves right now, but it's not good oil.
Huh? What do you mean by that?
Well, there's different grades of crude, and Venezuela has one of the lowest grades of crude, which is the reason why the United States refineries have the technology to refine this type of oil. And it reminds me, and I don't want to get off on this subject, but it's amazing to me how Nigeria, which also suffers from not having refineries to refine, but Nigeria has what they call one of the best grades of crude. They call it sweet crude.
Sweet crude, yeah.
Yet, unlike and they're a member of OPEC, but I never understood why, being a member of OPEC, why Nigeria isn't why their oil riches haven't developed their country like the Saudis and all the Arabs and all stuff. Even though they have the best crude, that goes back to white supremacy. Still goes back to policies that heavily subsidize Nigerian oil, basically like Europeans have done everywhere in Africa. Just take what they want and don't want to pay for it,
right?
And give so. And it also has a lot to do with corrupt African leadership too, that are more concerned about their own enriching themselves as opposed to making sure that their country, their fellow countrymen, and their citizens, benefit from the oil. But this is it. The United States is about stamping out the self-determination of these countries, especially countries that are ran by people of color. And it doesn't mind you that the same cast of characters are all joining in with the United States, all of Western Europe. Everybody decide to take the lead and recognize the opposition,
right?
And Israel. So what they got all in common? White. You know what I mean? And I have to say that Israel is the government is a white nation. It's a colonial settler colony nation. So they all are imperialists. They all have gotten where they are by taking from others and by especially taking from people of color. Whether it's usurping the land in Palestine, whether it's usurping the land from the indigenous people here, whether it's usurping the land and the people of Africa,
right,
and the resources, so they all get together and like, hey, we're going to back you up. And we recognize it. And they recognize it because, first of all, this guy, what's his name, Guaido?
Juan Guaido.
Yeah, Guaido the opposition had already made a deal with the United States and said, we're going to unnationalize our resources once we're in power, and we're going to open it up to a free market economy. But that's all they want to hear.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So that means that things, this is the language that they understand. So now they have a government, as Simon Roth said in Godfather 2, we have a friendly government, and we're able to, Michael, we're bigger than U.S. Steel. You know what I mean? So so you got a bunch of gangsters. Once again, I don't care how they dress themselves up, France and all. They're still using the methods of their colonial forefathers. And even along with threatening military power. This is the same language that their thieving, enslaving, colonial, disease-spreading ancestors used back then, when they started to come out of Europe and they started to take over different places. And so it's the same playbook.
It is absolutely the same playbook. And I'm so glad you made it clear of which countries are recognizing the Juan Guaido as the legitimate president of Venezuela, and which countries are recognizing, and all the other countries that are not recognizing him but are recognizing Maduro as the continued legitimate president of Venezuela. The countries, with the exception of, I think, Jamaica, got strong-armed by the European and Western powers, and they fell in with them. But every other black and brown country in the world recognizes Nicolas Maduro as the legitimate president of Venezuela. Now, what you're not seeing in the media, this is another point of white supremacy, and then we're going to move on off of this topic to go on to the State of the Union address, but this has to be said because I'm glad you brought up Africa.
Mm-hmm.
You know what you don't hear about in the media in this conversation about Venezuela? Africa. Every African leader has supported Nicolas Maduro as the legitimate leader of Venezuela. Not because they are so in love with Maduro and the kind of leader he is. That's not even the argument. And that's an argument, it's a false argument that people have been using here in the United States, especially, oh, Nicolas Maduro is a dictator. You know, he's an evil man. He's a blah, blah, blah. The issue is not whether he is a good leader or not. That's not up for us to decide, because if a leader being, quote unquote, a bad leader, if a leader of a country being a bad leader was a legitimate reason to recognize just some random other person who didn't even run in the election as the legitimate leader of that country, then somebody better declare Bernie Sanders president of the United States, like right now. Because the leader we have sucks balls. I mean, if being a bad leader is all that it takes for the rest of the Western and imperial powers to declare that you shouldn't be the leader anymore. So no, the issue is not whether Maduro is a good leader or a bad leader. The issue is, in fact, like you stated, the right of sovereign nations. You hear that a lot in the United States, but nobody else can be sovereign but us. The right of sovereign nations for self-determination, especially sovereign nations, like you said, that are run by people of color, Black people, and recognizing the vote, the legitimate vote, the expression of their will, of the will of 6 million Venezuelan people. Now, if in this country, and we claim, at least our leaders anyway, we know this is a lie, our leaders sit in Congress at the State of the Union address and talked about Venezuela and it's a failed socialist country, and you know, America will never be socialist, and the Democrats actually applauded when Trump said that during the State of the Union address, that, you know, the United States, he recognized Juan Guaido as the legitimate president of Venezuela. Just Tuesday night, he said this in the State of the Union address. And then he goes on to talk about how Venezuela is a failed socialist state. And then he goes on to say the United States will never be a socialist nation. And the Democrats stood up and cheered that man.
Right.
And then the camera pans to crotchety ass Bernie Sanders sitting there like, fuck you. Because you know that was a dig at Sanders. That wasn't really about Venezuela. But here's the larger issue. We've got a so-called opposition party in Congress under the name of the Democrats, who really are not opposed to American white supremacy and imperialism around the world. They're really not. Because if they were opposed to not just this president, but the very idea of violating the sovereignty of another country in the name of stealing their oil and getting rid of the brown guy who has used, the second brown guy, who has used the country's riches to empower the least, the poor in that society, then not one Democrat would have stood up and applauded what Trump said.
Yeah, well, I mean, it doesn't surprise me. I'm not surprised because, first of all, you know, when you talk about them not acknowledging the votes of 6 million Venezuelans, I mean, look, you take a poll in the United States of Americans and ask them how many Americans want universal health care, how many Americans want a higher minimum wage, how many Americans want free college, or they want, or you know, how many Americans don't want their kids being in debt by student loans.
Right.
And the numbers on both sides, whether they're Republicans or Democrats, I mean, the numbers are always high that most Americans want these things. Yet why don't we have them?
Right.
You know, so why don't we have them? So if this was about the will of the people, hell, they don't respect the will of their people.
That's
So if they're
exactly
not, so
true.
if they're not respecting the will of their people, how the hell we expect them to respect the will of people somewhere else?
Right, right.
You know what I mean? I mean, most Americans been asking for universal health care, man, for the longest time. And I don't care what side of the aisle they vote for. That's what they want.
Mm-hmm.
They want more jobs. They want this. They want that. But yet we can't get it. You know what I mean? So they, doesn't matter what we want. It doesn't matter what the Venezuelan people want. It doesn't matter what nobody wants. What matters is the people who are beholden to corporate interests, the wealthy elites, the international bankers, all the stuff, the same cast of characters that have been screwing up the world for the last couple hundred years.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? The same cast of characters that's been funding wars, that have been financing wars on both sides. All of these people, because it's all about them making money. That's all it's about. It's about them. They could give a damn about the will of the people.
Yeah.
So the Democrats, as far as you said that there's no opposition, well, yeah, there is no opposition. You know what I mean? Because look, the Democrats, like you said, they all support the same agenda. The Democrats, look, they have very slight differences, but they never seen a war they didn't like.
Nope.
And the reason why they didn't see a war that they like, because all of these representatives, war is what constitute opportunities in a lot of their districts too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There are Democrats who have defense contractors in their district.
That's true. That's true.
There are Democrats who in their district, war pays the bills. So, hell, we don't make anything anymore. I mean, besides weapons. And, so a lot of these districts and stuff, democratically controlled districts, war pays the bills. And no one wants, in America, where America has become such a warmongering country, and that war is the way this country does business. No politician, except if they're very, very no politician except if they have principles like the Bernie Sanders, but not even Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders really hasn't come out against a war either. So I mean, the way that the political game is played in the United States, any politician who comes out against wars really is really putting their political career in jeopardy, because the way that war is sold.
Right.
Someone had said when I was on By Any Means Necessary, someone said, "Oh well, I think that the American people are getting sick and tired of war and they're war weary," and I disagreed with that. I said it's not that the American people are war weary or that they're tired of war. It's that they're numb. They don't, they're numb to war. Mm-hmm. You have a generation that, since they were born, all they know is that the United States is at war with somebody.
That's
you
true.
know what I mean? So it's it's not that the American people are tired of war. It's that the American people are numb to it.
It's normal.
It's normal. It's normal that we're it's like a rat beef. It's normal that we're beefing with somebody.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so the thing of it is that, and again, we have a media that doesn't do its fucking job. Mm-hmm. We have a media that comes out and they don't show they don't show the human cost of war. Even when they show the destruction of war, even when they show the bombed out neighborhoods of Syria and the bombed out neighborhoods of Fallujah and stuff, where's the people?
Right.
All we see is destroyed buildings, and then Americans look like that and say, "Oh well, shit, Detroit looks like that."
Exactly. And you know how we don't give a shit about Detroit looking like that. So we don't care about a bunch of brown people in a country that we ain't never been to, we can't get to.
Exactly.
So I agree.
Tulsi Gabbard is anti-war, but Tulsi Gabbard is not in. See, this is the thing. You got Tulsi Gabbard and you got what's her name, Cortez. Uh-huh. Yes, you do have people who are anti-war, but they're not in charge right now.
You have three people who have come out specifically against the coup in Venezuela. Tulsi Gabbard, Bernie Sanders, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Actually 4, I think Ro Khanna sort of kind of came out against it. The problem we had with their statements, Ro Khanna and I think Bernie Sanders, was that they parroted the whole Maduro is a bad guy party line first. They made clear that they agreed with the, we have to punish Maduro for being a bad person, but maybe we shouldn't invade their country to do it. You know, that, I'm sorry, that to me, that's not being anti-war. That's not being anti-imperialist. That's not speaking out against the coup. That's just saying you want to punish this guy for being a leader that in a way that you don't like, in a different way. You know, you want the United States to exercise its imperial and white supremacist power in this sovereign brown nation in a way other than a military coup. I'm not feeling that so much.
No, and again, just to wrap this up, is yes, you have Tulsi Gabbard, and you have others, that are anti-war, but they're not in charge. And our job is to get them there, to get them in charge, to get politicians like them in charge, so that we can finally have a government that will practice a humane way of dealing with the world.
Right. Which is, yeah, it takes a lot of energy to do this, to be thinking like this, y'all. Which includes, like Summer Hazlitt said over on YouTube, no war. A world with no, I'm sorry, over on Facebook. I forgot which one. I forgot that we were looking at different screens. A world with no war. You know, we got a long, yes, we have a long way to go before we get that. But
well, we'll never have that.
I don't think we will ever have that either.
Human beings are by nature warlike, is a warlike species. And we'll never have a world without war. I mean, you know, I used to laugh at Star Trek as much as I like Star Trek, but you know, these evolved humans going around telling everybody else how to live. You know, this benign imperialism in space. You know what I mean? You know, you're either with the Federation or you're a savage.
Well, it's still aggression. I mean, they might not have been bombing people, but it's still imperialism and aggression.
Yep, that's it. So we'll never get that, but we can get a world where people at least handle most of their conflicts without war.
Yeah, and I do believe that we have to be honest about our politicians, even our favorite ones, even Saint Bernie, when he doesn't quite measure up, when they don't quite measure up to our standards.
You know, and before we move on, I like to say the aliens that took our primate ancestors and genetically engineered them into us, they never thought of taking out that violent gene that was within the primate. You know, because I actually believe that. I mean, I believe in, you know, creator and all this stuff, but it's just so much fun to believe that there was an advanced alien civilization that looked at all the primates and was like, oh, we picked this one and we'll genetically engineer them, turn them into a very highly intelligent primate, and just see how they do. You know what I mean? And you know, so in that genetic engineering, they didn't take out that propensity for the animalistic violence that is inherent in a lot of animals. You know, I mean, animals are violent for a reason, but once these alien creators of ours, you know, once these alien creators of ours decided to, you know, create us, then
we're just violent for no reason other than greed,
because of the big brain thing. You know?
Right, you know, animals are violent because they got to eat.
Yeah,
you know, us.
But I digress.
That was a good digression though, because now I just can't I can't help but think of the lions chasing people, chasing other animals down on the, you know, that's we're geeks like that. We love that kind of stuff.
Yep.
I mean, so last thing on the State of the Union address before we move on. Trump's whole State of the Union address, first of all, you know, it was a big old lie. We're not going to go into details. You've seen all the details about the State of the Union address. What it was a big old clarion call to the white supremacists and the white nationalists of the world. Donald Trump really stood there and spent all this time demonizing brown people, immigrants, telling a bunch of lies about what's going on at the border. Oh, there's this crisis at the border. There's all this violence. There are all these what did he say? He said it was so many murders that you couldn't count. That's not even true. Committed by illegal aliens. Not even true. There is no crisis of violence at the border unless, of course, you're talking about Customs and Border Patrol shooting tear gas at people and separating children from their parents.
I mean, children that they still can't account for.
Thousands of children. And now this man has come out and said, and this administration has come out and said that they're not even going to try to reunite these children with their families, because if they actually said that it would probably be more traumatic for the children. Listen to me. Listen to Luqman Nation right now. Let us tell you what is going to happen to those little brown babies. They're going to be adopted by a bunch of crazy Christo-fascist white people who are going to indoctrinate those babies into American conservative Christianity and turn them into the Latino, the son of the Latino immigrant Customs and Border Patrol agent who was a guest of Trump for his bravery and heroism at the border. I'm telling you, I know it sounds conspiratorial, but just because it sounds like a conspiracy, it doesn't mean it's not one. Yeah. It doesn't mean that's not what they're doing.
Yeah, or the more tragic part of it could be that many of those children will end up in sex trafficking trades.
That too.
You know, so
that too.
You know, and so it's you know, unless they find these children and make sure that they're united with their parents or relatives or in a safe environment, the world itself is cruel to the vulnerable, and nobody's more vulnerable than children. So Shirley Vick said, did you hear that Trump supporters who are middle class file tax returns are owing the IRS money? I loved it. I thought it was a beautiful thing.
We've seen the tweets.
Yeah.
We think they're hilarious. We laughed at every single one. No, we don't have any compassion for those people because they swore all up and down that Trump was going to bring jobs back. And he was going to help the working man and the middle class. And we kept telling people Donald Trump is a sexist, racist, lying pig.
But you know who else aren't? You know who aren't pissed?
Who?
All the millionaires and billionaires that he gave the big tax cuts to.
They're the ones who he was talking about in the State of the Union address when he said that the economy is booming, that America has the hottest economy in the world. He wasn't talking about us little people who actually have to file taxes and pay them. Mm-hmm. He was talking about his rich friends who, like you said, he gave his golf buddies who he gave all those tax cuts to. Whenever this administration, and any administration really, talks about the economy, they're talking about Wall Street. They're not talking about Main Street. They're not talking about you and me and, you know, your mama and your daddy and your aunties and everybody who's got to work a job.
But it's actually to America. You know, we always talk about Wall Street. There's 3 streets. There's Wall Street, there's Main Street, and then there's Martin Luther King Boulevard.
And we live on MLK Boulevard.
Martin Luther King Boulevard. And they never talk about Martin Luther King Boulevard. You know what I mean? You know, Wall Street they talk about Main Street, but they never talk about Martin Luther King Boulevard, and that's where we live. You know what I mean? You know, so no, we don't live on Main Street. Main Street wouldn't have us. In fact, Main Street were the ones that redlined us out of there. So we ain't on Main Street. We're on Martin Luther King Boulevard, and they never talk about that.
I was about to say we got redlined.
Yeah, we got redlined off of Main Street. I'm talking about, man, look.
and that's why that is so funny. And that's why the crap that man said in that State of the Union address was so ridiculous. It was so racist. It was so divisive. It was so much lies. And I listened to Stacey Abrams deliver the official Democratic response. I listened without bias because I like Stacey Abrams, right? I was really excited for her candidacy. Didn't like a lot of her policies, but I was glad that sister ran the campaign she did, and she was not afraid of Brian Kemp, and she still ain't, and that's great. Don't like that she is now working for a neoliberal think tank. That's a problem, but I'm just talking about her, the response to the State of the Union.
Sister gotta eat.
Trust
me, sister gotta eat.
You know, but we're just talking about her response to the State of the Union, right? Because you would think that, you know, the Democratic Party going into 2020 basically handicapped, right? I mean, they got a terrible message. They got terrible candidates so far. Nobody likes any of the Democratic candidates that have declared, except for maybe Tulsi Gabbard. We're a lot smarter. We meaning people in who are engaged in politics now are a lot smarter about doing our own investigating and vetting into these politicians and their records. Stuff right out there is public record, their voting record, you know, accounts from reputable sources about the legislation they passed in the states they worked in. So we're a lot smarter about that now. So you would think that the official Democratic response would come out swinging against Trump. But that's not quite what happened. So you've got this dynamic black woman who, yes, she was more polished, she was more professional, she was definitely, she definitely conveyed an air of moral superiority over Trump's racist and divisive language in his State of the Union address. She absolutely delivered the message of bringing Americans together, and
that's our job.
And you know, but
as black
see,
people, that's
our job.
Yeah.
And I listened to Stacey Abrams' speech, and I knew that Nancy Pelosi told her she could only go so far. Because remember, Stacey Abrams delivered the official Democratic response. That has to be approved by the leader of the Democratic Party in Congress, and that's Nancy Pelosi. And I don't care what she says, Nancy and Trump aren't sworn enemies.
No. I know, I can say, you know, while you're talking about it, I can see Nancy Pelosi and Stacey Abrams in her office, and Nancy, you know, with her 90-year-old self putting the glasses on, saying, let me see what you got here. She's like, no, you see that line there where you call Trump a dick? You can't do that. No, we're going to scratch that out because, you know, that's not proper decorum. You know, we're not going to, you want to be in a finger cookie? I got a bunch of cookies over there. You can have some cookies if you want to when I get it. No, you can't call them cracker. No, you can't do that, Stacey. I understand how, you know, they may do things different in Georgia, but up here, no, you know, you're in DC now. You can't do that. You know, and you know, so no, you have to take this line out here too. It's like, let me see. Then she holds it up like this. I guess, yeah. You know, but no, you can't call them cheesecake. You know, no, you can't.
You can't call them Cheeto.
You can't call them Cheeto. No, we don't talk that way here.
Oh yeah, I absolutely believe that there was a meeting, and I think this meeting happened before the State of the Union address. I think Stacey Abrams wrote her speech before the State of the Union address. Yeah, I know we're having some buffering issues, folks. I don't know what that's about. But we hope they will straighten out soon. We think that the speech was written before the State of the Union address, and we think that Nancy Pelosi definitely told Stacey Abrams, look, we're not going to do a whole bunch of criticizing Donald Trump, you know, because that's just not what we want to go low. We want to go high when he goes low. I absolutely believe that happened, and I think unfortunately, because of that, the Democrats missed their moment. I think they made a nice emotional stirring case for, like, they made you feel like you want to be a part of a family, but there wasn't any hard hitting response to the garbage Trump said. So the Democrats came away from that, even though, you know, it was a very positive State of the Union address. And there were some issues that Stacey Abrams raised about what Trump said that they were good. But at the end, I think, and she just went to, I don't want the president to fail. Yes, we do. Yes, we do want this president to fail. We want this president to fail.
Yeah, because I don't want a second term with him.
No, but nobody wants to. We want this man man to fail at building this wall. We want him to fail at keeping these children separated from their families. We want him to fail about continuing to lie about the black unemployment rate. We want him to fail at his plans that the Democrats are not stopping to pack the courts with ultra-right conservative justices. We want him to fail at these things. So I'm not down with this kumbaya from the Democrats, even delivered by Stacey Abrams, that we have to play nice with the white supremacist in chief. No, I want him to fail. We want him to fail at his white supremacist agenda. We absolutely do. And it was unfortunate that wasn't called out by Stacey Abrams. But, and I'm not saying we're not endorsing anybody. It is unfortunate that Stacey Abrams didn't call out Donald Trump's racism and white supremacy, but Bernie Sanders did.
Right.
And we got a problem with that.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we do. We have a very big problem of it. But as we're going to go for a break right now, and when we come back, I was very excited today. In my, as I was driving the truck in an undisclosed location, to hear the voice of AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and some of the sound bites that I heard over the radio while I was driving in my undisclosed location, the things that she had to say, she got me excited about where I hope we are heading when it comes to what type of politicians we could possibly have. We'll talk about that. We'll also talk about why is it that that white guys could be accused of things, or people can be accused of things and be given a pass or made excuse, but as soon as a black person is accused of something, then
off with his head.
Right. Then there's there's presumed guiltiness as opposed to the other way around. We're going to talk about that, and what I'm referring to, so it'll be no mystery, we're talking about Ralph Northam, and we're talking about Fairfax.
Justin Fairfax, and everybody in between.
Everybody in between. We're going to talk about that, and we're going to end with this. Pardon me. We're going to end with the high suicide rate of Chicago police. There's a report that came out that Chicago police are killing themselves or committing suicide, which I think. How you put this? More than twice the national
right.
national
at a rate
average.
That's more than twice the national
at a rate
average,
that is
right.
more the national average. So we want to talk about why is it that Chicago police are committing suicide in such high numbers. So we're going to take a break. We're going to be back, and we hope that the chump that's monitoring our feed and YouTube.
Take a bathroom break so we can get this straight. We can have a good rest.
But when you are the most dangerous show anywhere, we expect this type of thing.
This is what happens. Stick around, y'all. We'll be right back. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. This is Jackie Luqman.
With that, the Shahid Luqman.
And this is another episode of the second half of another episode of Live in Coffee, Current Events, and Politics in Luqman Nation.
The most dangerous show on social media anywhere.
Yep, and we are definitely feeling that tonight because we got these weird buffering issues that we haven't had in a while.
Yeah.
We have not had these kind of buffering and technical issues in a little while. And Brewski made an appearance, so there he is, going back to his, making himself a little bit more comfortable. Luqman, our intern back there, or down there. But like we said, like we've been really busy the past month. We have been guests on By Any Means Necessary on Sputnik Radio. We have been guests on, we have regular spot on Loud and Clear on Sputnik Radio on Wednesdays and on Fridays. We have done segments on the Real News Network. And we say the same stuff in those places that we say here. And we're pretty sure it's gotten some attention. So also, we have to be clear. Facebook has been throttling bandwidth and removing content of people who have been critical of Venezuela. So we're taking all this into account and you know, recognizing this probably isn't like our equipment. This you know, we know what's going on. So just bear with us, guys, and let's keep going with this conversation about white supremacy and all this stuff that we are seeing in the past week. So we just ended talking about the State of the Union address and Stacey Abrams' response and Bernie Sanders' response, and how, you know, Abrams didn't really call out Trump's racism. But Sanders did, and we have a problem with that because, look, black people need to, I don't care who, you need to grow, we need some spine.
Yeah, and I think that it's the same white liberal paternal way of holding us back. What I'm saying is, it wouldn't surprise me if the same old thing is being played out where we don't want to offend potential white voters by having this black woman talk about Trump's racism. You know, we'll get the white guy to do that. You know,
right?
We'll get the white guy to do that, but we don't think that it looks proper if we get, you know, this black woman who had this very contentious governor's race, you know, and, you know, we don't want her to come off looking like an angry black woman.
Yes.
You know.
Yes. That was it. That was absolutely it. Listen, I loved Stacey Abrams' stories. You know, I loved her talking about her family and her father and you know, how you all saw the State of the Union
I was raised
address.
a poor black child.
You better don't you make fun of her. Don't you do it. But it's not, it was great, and I know some people will disagree. It was great for the Democratic Party as the party currently exists. For what that party needs in 2020, and especially for black people, not what is needed. We don't believe that was what was needed at all. As much as people didn't like that Bernie Sanders gave his own response to the State of the Union address only on social media and after the official address. And at the beginning of his address, he did congratulate Stacey Abrams, you know, recognized her, said she did a great job. I'm sorry, Bernie Sanders, he delivered the kind of goods that are needed to really speak truth to power about the white supremacist in chief. But this brings us to what you were excited about today.
Right. Well, I also want to say this before we get off the Bernie Sanders thing. If Bernie, the way that you know, we love the way that Bernie addressed the State of the Union, that's all fine. And Uncle Bernie standing up, you know, speaking truth to power and stuff. I just wish that if Uncle Bernie throws his hat into the ring again and it goes down like it did last time, don't cave in.
Yes.
Don't you know?
Yes.
Don't bring us close to orgasm and pull out.
mean, like, I'm done.
Yeah. Don't bring us close there, and then talk about how was it for you? How was it for me?
How was it for me? I didn't get that. I took when I got here, so I'm okay.
So I'm just, look, Bernie, if you're gonna go all the way. You know what I mean?
And honestly, if you're gonna declare your intention to run, Bernie, the first thing you need to do is get your behind down to the South and talk to some black voters. Yeah. That's the first thing you need to do. But we know people who are closer to Bernie Sanders than we are, who have had these discussions with him. We're just letting you know that we recognize that as much as we like Uncle Bernie's State of the Union response, we recognize he ain't perfect either, and we're not afraid to criticize him too. So what's the thing that was exciting you?
I was sitting in the truck, and at my undisclosed location, and they were talking about AOC. Y'all all know who that is. So and they was playing sound bites. Now I haven't been listening to radio for a couple of days. So when it came on, she was talking about this thing about the new Green Deal that she's promoting.
Green New Deal.
And I heard where she was on Face the Nation with Chuck Todd, that corporate leprechaun.
Oh my God.
And so he's on there, right? And the thing of it is, just like the media, man, it's like they don't embrace anything except what the corporate line is. And he's asking this woman about, well, how are we going to pay for this Green New Deal of yours? How are we going to do this? And I love her answer. She was like, well, why is there a problem with asking industry? Here it is. We're in the United States, this country that boasts about all the innovation and all of, we have on the History Channel, the men who built America and all this other, and we can't ask them we can't push them to come up with alternative, with technology that doesn't have to rely on fossil fuels. Come on. We know that they've done it already.
Right.
It's just that the lobby, the fossil fuel lobby won't allow it to be put into mass use. But we know they've done that already. They've done that 50 years ago. You know what I mean? So, but what she's saying is that no one never talks about cost when this nation is set on doing something like going to war.
Right.
When this nation is set on building, but even with the wall, he still got some money for it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's like, come on. So all this stuff about, nobody talked about how much it costs to give these billionaires the largest tax cut, which is going to add trillions of dollars to the debt later on. No one cares about how much that costs. And this is the job the media should be asking. Right. This is the job that the media should be into. But what I also like what she said was, I gotta calm down. What I also like what she said is when she said how you can never get justice in the country until we address the legitimate concerns of, and I'm paraphrasing, it's not exact words, but where she said, unless we deal with the problems of the indigenous communities. And she mentioned something which was dear to my heart, the racial wealth gap.
She said the word?
She said the entire
racial
word.
Wealth gap.
She said racial wealth gap, and she said, and also deal with those people who have been disaffected. And she's talking about poor whites with the closing of the coal mines and all this stuff. And she's talking about the poor whites in West Virginia, Appalachia, and all this stuff. So I was really excited, to hear a politician, which she is now, talking this type of stuff. Not afraid to say racial wealth gap. Yeah. Not be like, look, forget the white politicians. You got black politicians that won't say that. They'll jump around and say, they'll dance all around the issue and everything like that and say, well, if you really look at it, the compensation that should have been given to those who were enslaved and who never really received their due compensation that could have resulted in a way, bruh, the racial wealth gap.
It's the racial wealth gap.
Right.
Okay, you don't want to say the other R word. You can say racial wealth gap.
So it was really refreshing to hear this young woman talk about these type of issues without feeling, because politicians are always calculating things, and they're always like, well, if I say this, I'm going to get this demographic angry. If I do this, I'll do that. So who can I get angry and it won't really affect me? Black people.
Yep. So every time.
Okay, so I can get black people mad and it won't really affect me because who cares if they get mad? But she didn't do that. What she said, she included, and she was make. So I said to myself, all of these so-called progressives who had a problem with this woman, y'all need to really, really, really chill out, because all of these establishments. That's why Nancy Pelosi was hating. That's why Nancy Pelosi was like, "New green, what? Huh?
The new green dream. What is that? What is that? Is that what they call it?
Is that the?
But they're for it, right?
Right. Is that the that we used to have a called the green machine when I was a kid. It was like a big wheel, but it was green. And is that the green machine?
She didn't say
I don't know. What is that? You know, what, the Green Goblin? I don't understand. But the thing of it is that she can't come out for it. She can't really support it. She can't really come out because, see, the fossil fuel agencies had put money in all of their pockets.
That's right.
So Nancy can't come around and say, see, Nancy's Pelosi and these all so-called progressive Democrats, their way of dealing with climate change and dealing with the fossil fuel industry is sitting up there begging them to reform.
Right.
You
what
know? Look at what you're doing.
What can we give you if you change?
Right,
No, that's not how it should be done. Now to be fair, because look, like we said, we criticize everybody. We don't care who it is. If their policies come up lacking in one area and we like them in another area, we'll talk about both. Now, the Green New Deal, let's be honest, the Green New Deal is a variation of the Green Party's Green New Deal.
Okay.
And it does not include the comprehensive fossil fuel reforms that's in the original Green Party New Deal. Now, so that's an issue, and that's something that needs to be addressed.
So what, they want credit or something?
No, I'm just saying that we're just being fair now.
All right,
we're just being fair.
Okay, so the Green Party came up with it, fine.
We're just being fair, and AOC's Green New Deal doesn't really address taking on the fossil fuel industry. Now, I'm not saying that she's, because I know some people will go this far. Well, that means she's bought by the fossil fuel industry. No. I'm just saying that in her variation, which I'm sure she didn't write all by herself, it's not in there. Now, if AOC is bold enough to go to Congress and talk about the racial wealth gap and talk about advocating for working class people, surely those people have her ear and can let her know, you know what, we don't like that there is this weakness in this piece of legislation. That's one thing, right? And that's fine. The other thing I think is really, really important, what you said about Nancy Pelosi, she has to come out against this. It doesn't even matter that the Green New Deal doesn't have, a pointed anti-fossil fuel platform in it right now, as of yet. It doesn't even matter. It pisses Nancy Pelosi off enough that she has to come out against it, even as it is, because it forces the Democratic Party to address issues that they've ignored.
And I think that's really the biggest benefit so far about her coming out. Bills can always be amended.
Exactly.
Bills can be rewritten. You could put legislation in and then go back and amend them again and stuff. So because it's not everything in there that we would like to see doesn't make it a bad thing. I think the fact that it gets people to talking, it gets Nancy Pelosi nervous. It gets the establishment nervous just to know that you got a crop of these new freshman Congress people coming in, and they're not look. We was going to originally entitle this Miss Cortez Go to Washington after Mr. Smith goes to Washington, because why is she talking like this? She could talk like this for one thing because of where she comes from. She doesn't come from privilege. She doesn't come from privilege, and so she here's a person that worked as a waitress, a person that knows about the working class. We're not talking about people who go to Washington and they get so settled in the culture that they wind up coming out millionaires.
Right.
Now, I don't know what her future is, but I know right now she went down there to make change. She went down there to say, look, I'm running because I want to make change. And so right now, from what I'm hearing, that's what, from what she is saying out of her mouth, is what, that's what I'm taking away from it. I'm taking away that this is a person who went down there not to mess around with politics as usual.
Right.
I'm going down there because I want to make a change. Like I said, I don't know her future. She might come out, she may settle and be corrupted by Washington politics and stuff like that, and sell out and take the money and run. I don't know. I pray not. I hope not. But right now, dealing with the person that I see, that I'm hearing from now, I think that once you put the grassroots behind her, and we said this last time, these are people who come from grassroots.
Right.
Exactly. these ain't people who were chosen by other interests and say, okay, you're going to run and we're going to put the money behind you and stuff. No, this is grassroots, from the grassroots to Congress, and carrying our aspirations with it.
Right. I mean, I absolutely agree that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is the kind of politician, whether people agree entirely with everything she introduces or not, she is the kind of politician we've been talking about we need to have if we're talking about just electoral politics, that's all we're talking about right now, then she's the kind of politician we need. Somebody from among the people who takes the message of what the people need, because she doesn't come from a wealthy family that selected somebody to be the next senator or the next congressman from whatever. Somebody who the people really selected from among them and said, yeah, you can represent us. And she goes and really represents the people. And she and Representative Ilhan, and the two Native American women, the two first Native American women in Congress ever, can go. They can be Ayanna Pressley. They can be the inspiration for the change that we need to make in Congress as far as elected representatives are concerned. She's speaking the language. She and those other women in Congress, those other freshman women, are speaking the language of the marginalized people that the Democratic Party has ignored all this time. And they're laying the template. They are showing people how to speak for these people and not be afraid in the face of all of this power. We're not even talking about Republican power. We're talking about the Democrats, who we all have figured out don't want these messages to be propagated because they don't want to give up their power and privilege. So, here Miss Ocasio-Cortez is in Washington, and Miss Ilhan and Miss Pressley and these other two, and they are laying the groundwork for the revolution y'all said y'all wanted since 2016.
Yep, I agree. So, going down to Virginia with Ralph Northam, and there seems to be this, when we were speaking about this earlier, of this hypocrisy that we see when it comes to, especially with this whole Me Too thing. We spoke about, now let's make this clear, Ralph Northam has not been accused of sexual misconduct, but he has been accused of racism, of blackface, and it's just something like, what is it in white culture? Why is it? Because this isn't the first time. It's not the first time that somebody looks back, that you shake the tree and somebody in blackface falls out.
you find the yearbook,
yeah.
you clean it out the attic, and it's
right.
like, oh Jesus, 18 pages of blackface.
Right. I mean,
and they're all elected officials.
Yeah, it's like, what is that? And even this whole thing of these politicians aligning themselves with white racist organizations and ideologies and behavior. I mean, even the picture of Mitch McConnell standing in front of the Confederate flag is making its rounds again. And,
right.
People talking about that. And, so, I mean, this kind of thing of what's happening. Now, Ralph Northam, for those of you who been paying attention, In his medical yearbook, I think back in 1984 when he was in medical school, there was a picture of him, allegedly him with blackface on, or he could have been in the Klan's. We don't know.
Yeah,
but
we don't know.
We don't know. He
To...
said that, oh yeah, it was me. Oh, wait a minute. Let me look at that again.
Wait a minute.
And then he looked at it again and said, no, that's not me. But then he said, well, I did wear blackface because I was imitating Michael Jackson. Yet there's not a picture found with him in blackface in a Michael Jackson costume. So, I mean, no, that could be me. No. As I look at, no, that's not me. No. But yet his name is over top.
It's his page.
Right.
It is Ralph. I forget what his middle name is.
Right.
But it's Ralph, whatever his middle name is, Northam, on that page. Every other picture on that page is of Ralph Northam. But just so happens the one with the two people, with one in blackface standing next to the person in the Klan uniform, that just so happens not to be his picture.
Right. But he's not being let off the hook. He's been, there's been calls for him to resign. The Black Caucus in Virginia, which I didn't know they had a Black Caucus in Virginia, but the Democratic Black Caucus is asking him to resign emphatically, and others are asking him to resign. The problem of it is, if he resigned, then that leaves it with Justin Fairfax. But then he has his own issues.
He's got his own issues.
Right. So here it is. Justin Fairfax, who could have been in line to be the second black governor. Wilder was the first. The second black governor, but he shook his tree, and a couple of women fell out. A couple of women fell out. You know what I mean?
Oh my God.
It's like,
see, listen. Didn't I just say a few minutes ago that we're smarter than we were in vetting candidates? Can we please vet these people before we vote for them? I mean, seriously, can we shake trees to get the blackface and the Klan robes and the women out of the tree before we elect these people?
Exactly.
Listen. Okay. In all seriousness, the thing with blackface and white people, I'm from Jarrett, Virginia, a little town 90 miles south of Richmond. Y'all have heard me talk about my little small town way too many times that you don't want to hear me talk about that place right now. My brother is on right now. He still lives in Emporia. My dad lives in Fayetteville, North Carolina. Family still, and they got problems. So we understand that none of this is like a surprise, right? Like, people who live in Virginia are like, the pictures of Ralph Northam, and let me be clear, this didn't start this season with Ralph Northam. Last month, there was a Republican a politician who a picture of him in blackface, dressed up as a woman, a black woman, with a sign on his chest that said Katrina victim. So I think he was from New Orleans.
Right.
That came out, and that he was a Republican. He had to step down. He had to resign because that picture surfaced, as well he should have. So just because this is Ralph Northam, the Democrat in Virginia, please don't think black folks are like, well, maybe nothing. We know that blackface is racist. White people know that blackface is racist. White people know that the Klan is and always has been a racist, violent, terrorist organization that has killed people. But yet, these folks think it's funny to pose for jokey pictures in college with somebody who's dressed up in a Klan outfit. And we're supposed to forgive these people because, it was in college and it was so long ago. It's 1985. I was a senior in high school in 1985.
I was a freshman in college.
Ralph Northam was in medical school. He was not a middle schooler.
He was 25 years old.
He was 25 years old. And I understand getting drunk and doing stuff that you don't remember. But I mean, okay, look, full disclosure. In my 20s, I got blackout, fallen down drunk, and had all kinds of indiscriminate sex and did some things that people, I have met people who would be like, do you remember what you did? Dear God, I don't remember doing that. So yeah, I completely understand being young, doing crazy stuff that you don't remember. But I never got so out of control of myself that I dressed up like a Nazi and posed for a picture as a joke with someone who was also dressed up like a Jew in a concentration camp outfit. As wild and reckless as I was in my 20s, I won't that hateful. Because that is what that is. That's hateful. That's not a joke. It's not funny. These people are not kids when they do this. So we've got people talking about, oh, Ralph Northam is a Democrat, and if he goes, then the Republicans will take over, and why do you want to ruin the man's career over something that happened so long ago? And we've been dealing with that argument for 2 days, because this just happened Thursday now. Thursday, Ralph Northam, I think that story surfaced Wednesday or Thursday. Then the Attorney General, picture with the Attorney General in it, surfaced in Virginia. Then another politician, his yearbook surfaced with some blackface Klan pictures in it that he was an editor of. And if you got a bunch of white people in your neighborhood, like burning stuff in their backyard all of a sudden, they burning their yearbooks. That's what's happening. So this has just been since Wednesday. And white people are losing their minds in Black History Month, telling black people we need to forgive Ralph Northam because they were kids when they did. He was a kid and he was young, and haven't we all made mistakes? And that was all fine and good until Justin Fairfax was accused of sexual assault.
Right.
Now there's no forgiveness to be had.
Well, the hypocrisy of it all is, and like I said, these are just allegations. These are allegations. No one has went to court. No one has been criminally charged. None of so in this country, it's supposed to be presumption of innocence until proven guilty. So all we have right now is allegations of two women, I believe now, who said that they were sexually harassed or in some cases more than sexually harassed. The first one said that she was forced to have oral sex with him, and so that's a very strong allegation. So I mean, of course he came out and denied it and said no, it wasn't. That wasn't the way it happened. I bought her dinner first, and no, it wasn't that. So he didn't say that. I actually bought her dinner first, and she ran up a high tab, and I was like, well, hey, no, he didn't say that. But he denied it and everything like that.
He did say they were in a relationship.
He said they were in a relationship, and basically, trying to put it out there that it was consensual. So you got all these things, and now we're in the era of the Me Too movement. But again, the reaction towards his indiscretions, if you could call them that, has been a lot different than the accusations of. And I know people say, well, it's two different things. One has something to do with sexual misconduct. The other has something to do with racist misconduct, or however you want to put it. And those two aren't the same. Okay, and I can understand that. But at the same time, this actually harkens back to a time and place in our society when it comes to black men and sex, black people and sex. We watch, we were in a time where Cosby is in prison right now, and I wonder what he ate tonight. Where Cosby's in prison right now, but you don't hear anything about Weinstein anymore.
Completely out of the headlines.
Weinstein is out of the headlines.
Yep.
And so now, and then R. Kelly, which is still out there. So basically the ones who are still being, having the being scrutinized for these type of actions are black men. The white men who have been accused of these things either are out of the headlines or they left the country.
Or they're Supreme Court justices.
Exactly.
I mean, and I think we need to make it clear. Listen, if Justin Fairfax did this, he needs to go too. See, the thing is, there is no question that Ralph Northam was either in blackface in that picture or was in that Klan uniform. There's no question he was in one of the two. There's no question that the Republican politician was in that picture in blackface with a Katrina victim, that sign on his chest. There's no question that these other politicians have participated in blackface and posed in racist pictures, and these are the people who have been making policy.
Right.
For I mean, so we have every right as the people who are subjected to their questionable judgment as far as policy toward us is concerned. We have every right to question whether they should still be in office because there is incontrovertible evidence of their questionable judgment. But we've been arguing with white people for a couple of days about why we can't even question these people's fitness for duty, but or not duty, but their fitness to serve, continue to serve us in office. But when the allegations against Fairfax comes out, most of those same people were either strangely silent or they're immediately calling for Fairfax to lose his job. That kind of hypocrisy we can't abide. Everybody goes or everybody stays. Everybody goes and look, everybody is questionable and they've all got to go. We got to wipe the slate clean and get rid of everybody, or we're forgiving everybody. I do not think that there is a fair, that this hypocrisy in these areas are fair. What do we got?
Uncle Brother says about Harvey Weinstein, he said actually Weinstein came up today. Some woman, an actress, came out talking about he's endured enough and it's time to back off.
See what I mean? Listen. We are not sitting here defending Justin Fairfax because I think every time we do a show, we're going to have to explain to people, we criticize everybody. There's nobody that we won't criticize when we don't agree with what they do. Not crazy about all of Fairfax's policies, really disappointed and very disturbed at these allegations coming out about him. The first one is not new. That it came out before, and there were questions about this account, and they were in a relationship. It did end badly. She wasn't credible but right. Now this other person has come out, and it's like, all right, wait a minute, dude. Now it's hard to defend you now.
Right,
bruh.
Right.
It's real hard to defend you now. So we're not sitting here defending Justin Fairfax. We're talking about the principle of how we hold our elected officials accountable for their actions and who we hold accountable for their actions. Because like Uncle Brother said, what he said white women were saying about Weinstein, that's the same kind of stuff a bunch of white women said about Kavanaugh. Same kind of stuff that a bunch of white women said about Trump.
Yep. And Trump, I mean, again, you have the hypocrisy of white men and their, of white men and their sexual indiscretions being allowed to just be excused. Where black men, like we said, we talk about Cosby, we talk about R. Kelly, we talk about others and Fairfax. Oh no, we have to punish them. And I'm with you, Jackie. I mean, it's like, well, if we're going to punish them, then we should punish Weinstein. We should punish them. Why is it that it's okay? Oh, he's endured enough.
Right.
I don't remember any of these women saying that about Cosby.
Nope. Nobody wanted to let up on Cotton. Not even us.
Right.
We didn't want to let up on him either.
We didn't. And so we have to be honest about a nation, about how we view sex and black people. How we view sex when it comes, and are we still subconsciously as a nation saying that white men can still have their cake and eat it too? And when we say we, I'm talking about white women, because it's white. Look. When it came to the NFL, right? And we spoke about this. Mm-hmm. How white feminists were able to take a black woman's pain and get positions for themselves on the NFL.
Yep.
They didn't bring black women in with them.
No, they did not. The NFL's newly created, well, it's not new now, but after the Ray Rice incident, the NFL created the Office of Domestic Violence or something or other like that. Bunch of white women in that. Bunch of white women in those positions. No black women.
Even though the NFL has what 80% 80% of the players are black,
right?
Which means most of them have black women mates or spouses.
Exactly. So those women in that office that oversees domestic violence issues in the NFL, they're not representing black women, and we know this because when Ray Rice's black wife came out and said, "Listen, I understand my husband did a horrible thing, but I was guilty too. And I am not going to stand here and let you take my husband's livelihood away for what she called was a mistake." Now, it's not up to me to decide whether she wants to stay with her husband or not. She said it was a mistake. She wanted to, okay, fine. What did the white women in their new positions in the NFL do? They turned on Ray Rice's wife.
They did.
Talking about she didn't know what she was talking about. She's an abused woman. It's Stockholm Syndrome. And look, we all remember what happened.
Well, once again, it's the way of how some white folks deal with black people. We know best. I understand what you're saying, but we know best.
Right.
So it's this maternalistic, paternalistic relationship that they have with us. Like, we're a bunch of kids. We don't know what we're talking about. We don't know. But don't worry. We know what's best for you.
Right.
So we get all the positions, all of this. And I imagine the NFL, which got all this money, these women are making pretty good salaries, and at the same time, where's the black women that are able to have these positions too?
Right.
Even the police chief, Kathleen Neer, from DC, went to the NFL. She's a white woman.
That's right. I forgot about that. Yeah. That's right.
Kathleen Neer went to the NFL.
Yeah, I completely forgot about that.
Yep.
Thank you for reminding me about that. So when we talk about these issues of racism perpetuated by white men in power, from Kavanaugh, and like we said when we talked about Kavanaugh, the allegations of sexual assault by him were definitely an issue, but his record on racial issues and voting rights and other things were also issues that Democrats ignored, didn't pay any attention to, didn't argue against in those hearings at all.
Right.
So, same thing, Jeff Sessions' history of racism, this other justice that Trump tried to appoint, that Tim Scott eventually did block from being appointed. These are the kinds of issues where black people are targeted by white men in power through policy that we don't have any advocacy for in those halls of power. And then when these very same people, be they Republican or Democrat, come out with these pictures from their college days, not when they were in middle school, not when they were in high school, when they 20, 25 years old in college, portraying racist behavior, we're supposed to forgive them. Nobody advocated for us, but we're supposed to have all this understanding and advocacy for them. But then when we ask for the same kind of consideration and caution and what do you want to call it? Forgiveness, because that's what people are telling us to do. We got to forgive Northam and all these other white politicians who trotted around in blackface and Klan outfits. When we ask for those things for Fairfax, we don't get that. He doesn't even get the presumption of innocent until proven guilty. And that's a problem. Not because we believe Justin Fairfax is innocent. Let's make that clear. But because the hypocrisy of the way, particularly white people in this society, hold politicians accountable depending on who the politician is. This is something we've been seeing for a long time, and it's a problem.
Yeah, I agree. So we'll see how that goes and how that works out. I think that Fairfax has done I think that Northam will eventually resign, and
You think so?
I think he'll eventually resign. I think the pressure will be on him so much that he'll eventually resign. Now, the one that's lurking in the shadows is this Republican guy, you know. So the Democratic Party in Virginia has some problems. They're going to have to figure out how they're going to handle this. If Northam stays, he's going to be an ineffective governor because he's not going to be able to get any policies passed, or he's not going to be able to be an effective governor with this hanging over his head. Fairfax is done. Fairfax, I believe, is done. I don't think Fairfax even has the luxury of saying that he's not going to resign.
And you know what? That's a good point that you brought up right there. The fact that Fairfax is done, but Northam, all he has to do to finish out his term and just to be left alone is to just sit there and say, nope, I'm not going, which is pretty much what he did.
Right.
You know, Fairfax can basically say, you know, until the end of time, I didn't do it, I didn't do it, I didn't do it. And he will not. If Northam runs again, let's say he stays and he runs again, if he still has Fairfax as a running mate, he won't win.
Well, that's not. First of all, Fairfax's political career is over.
And that's the thing. It's like, okay, white men who do truly shitty things, whether it be a racist act or rape, because again, we got a rapist for a president. We've had a rapist for a president before, Bill Clinton. This ain't. We have a rapist and a racist for a president. Had one before. Several, actually. And we've got one as a Supreme Court justice. So white men get all the chances in the world.
Now, mind you, this Supreme Court justice not only was he accused of sexual misconduct, he's alcoholic.
And that too.
So he had a drinking problem, and he has a drinking problem. He had you know, according to some of his accusers, sexual misconduct issues. And yet, he still made it to the Supreme Court because people were like, well, why did you women wait till now? No one never asked this, well, especially with the Fairfax, because it was bothering me too. Like, this guy made it to be lieutenant general and lieutenant governor, and no one, while Northam was running, said, oh, wait a minute, that guy Fairfax, you might not want him because.
Right.
No one came out then.
Right.
You know, now don't sit up here and say to me, well, it doesn't matter when they come out. The fact that, oh, no, because white women and some black women said, well, when it came to Kavanaugh, well, that happened so long ago. Why'd they wait till now to ruin a good man's career? He was a good man who women were trying to ruin his career. But no one's saying this about Fairfax. Right. No one's saying that these women are coming out now trying to prevent this man from having a good political career in Virginia, that they're trying to stop him from higher aspirations. No one is saying that. Everybody is saying, no, he needs to be taken to task. And if he's done this, true, I agree. He needs to be taken to task. But how can one guy have these issues and be an alcoholic and stumble his way into the Supreme Court, you know, and everything's fine. Nobody mentions it anymore. There's no pressure on him.
Right.
But then this one here is like, well, you know, so.
Yeah, I mean, it's a whole bunch of issues, and we would not be Luqman Nation if we did not bring those issues to the fore and talk about them. So. Yep.
But yeah, I think in the end that they're both done eventually. Like I said, Fairfax's career is over. Northam, he, you know, basically his career is over too. I think, like you said, he's going to sit there like a wart in the governor's office and just sit there until his term is up. He can forget,
slink off into the.
Yeah, he can forget re-election. He can forget any of those things. I think that the Democratic machine down there may have him do that just to prevent the Republican guy from getting in. But then if he sits in office, he's going to be ineffective. So
yeah, that's true. Just to close this whole subject out, because there's so many different aspects. If you remember during the during the midterms, I can't even remember what year it is. During the midterms, where Northam was elected, Uncle Bernie didn't endorse him, and I don't believe it was because of any of this. It wasn't because of any of this. It's because Northam was not the progressive in the race. Fiorello was. So the Democrats again have to deal with the fact that they back the wrong people too many times. Mm-hmm. Too many times. So that's another. That's just something else to think about right there.
Well, in Chicago, police are committing suicide at astronomical rates.
What is that about?
Well, I have an article here from U.S. News, which was early this year. Says Chicago's cluster of police suicide raises alarms. The heroes need saving too, says the headline. As police officers, they're trained to be the problem solvers, the heroes, said the brother of an officer who killed himself. So here, let me get to some of the meat and potatoes of this thing here. All right, a Department of Justice report in 2017 says Chicago's officer suicide rate was 60% higher than the national law enforcement average. Police suicides in general are higher nationally than the number of officers killed in the line of duty. Blue HELP, a nonprofit made up of active and retired police officers, said at least 159 officers took their own lives in 2018. According to its data, more than the estimated 145 law enforcement officers who died while on the job. Mental health awareness advocates and former officers said it's crucial that police officers shed any sense of shame about mental illness in the profession, where such issues can often be met with silence. Chicago police officials are responding to the recent rash of suicides with changes such as plans to hire 6 more counselors. Before, they only had 3. For employees, bringing the total to 11. The department is also expanding its peer support program in which officers help one another, and added more clergy to its chaplain's ministry. At the time that the Justice Department found that Chicago's officer suicide rate was far higher than the national law enforcement average, the city's police force had 3 counselors for a staff of about 13,000. The same number as in Dallas with a smaller police force of about 3,400. A court-ordered federal consent decree proposed last year to bring more accountability to the Chicago Police Department included a call for increased mental health outreach and services for officers. Chicago Police Superintendent Eddie Johnson said last fall that therapists would be assigned to each department unit and that all officers involved in a traumatic event would be evaluated, not only those who felt directly affected. In addition, an Illinois law signed last August eliminated the requirement for officers to have a firearms owner's identification card as a condition of their employment. Previously, a card could be revoked for mental health reasons, one explanation for why officers might refrain from seeking help. About 2 weeks ago, after one officer's death, the Chicago Police Department went the extra step of releasing a video titled "You Are Not Alone" to put a spotlight on suicide prevention and mental health. So this is what. So they're talking about that the Chicago police officers are suffering a high amount of PTSD, that constant trauma. This is some of the reasons that they have given, and they said that Chicago is such a violent city, that the Chicago police are constantly being confronted with daily traumas, and these traumas are starting to become overwhelming. And this is leading officers who feel so overwhelmed to actually take their own lives. So this is what a lot of people who are considered experts in the field, this is what their findings are. Mm-hmm. They said that it's PTSD, it's trauma, and all of those things. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not, not a medical professional, but it appears that once again, we talk about white supremacy being all through this. Mm-hmm. And as much as I feel for these officers who committed suicide and their families, and I really do, once again, there is this, there's this thing in our national dialogue where we are able to excuse, we're able to recognize other people, mainly white people. Mm-hmm. And I know in officers, most Chicago police are diverse, but most of the officers who killed themselves were white. Mm-hmm. So it's like, okay, so they're suffering trauma, they suffer this, and that's true. PTSD, we know about these things. But I can't help but think how Luqman McDonald, who was shot like a dog down in the street 16 times as an animal, like an animal. Have how nobody never thought to see his mental state.
Right.
Nobody questioned his mental state. Nobody thought to take into consideration the trauma he might be under.
Right.
Now we're talking about a person who was not threatening to the cops at that time, physically threatening, but was still shot down with more than 16, 17 bullets. And and it was like, no one took into account, no one took into account a lot of these incidences where police shoot unarmed black people. The woman that was beaten on the side of the highway
Right.
by the
LAPD.
by the California Highway Patrol. And that she was walking down the highway and she seems to be disoriented. But yet, there was no medical response for that. No, what she got was pummeled by a male officer. No one talked about just recently of a video that just came out. I forget where the school district was, of a black young teenager being assaulted by this cop while five school staff stood around and watched this man throw this child around. So this was just recent. They just released the video. No one talked about what this child's mental state is. Right. So my thing is as much as I feel for what's happening in these police departments, and like I said, I'm not applauding, nor am I, I feel I'm not. It saddens me that people feel so overwhelmed that they have to take their own life. But what I'm saying is, at the same time, though, this mental health thing, black people never get the benefit of that.
That's right. That's right.
That's my issue.
And I'm so glad you brought this up, because the question I have is the issue really about police officers? We have to see all this violence in Chicago? Or are we talking about police officers who cannot deal with the trauma of all of the abuses that they see, that they say and do nothing about? I mean, because we are talking about Chicago. Chicago, it's not that Chicago is the most violent city in the United States. There's a study that just came out that Chicago isn't even in the top 5 of the most violent cities in the United States. So that myth.
Well, you have what the reason why Chicago is perceived to be the most violent, because of a media that likes to sensationalize violence in black areas.
Exactly, but this is the same city. When you want to talk about violence, this is the same city in which the police department, the Chicago Police Department, operated a black torture site at Holman Square. Remember, we posted that story year before last. The Guardian broke that story about Holman Square, a black torture site that the Chicago police used to arrest mostly black and Latino people, mostly men, and disappear them from the system. People would get picked up and arrested by the Chicago PD, and nobody knew where they were for months, sometimes years, and they were beaten and tortured in this place.
And also, we understand that one of the reasons, I think this happened some years ago, where the governor of Illinois, because of the amount of innocent people who were on death row coming out of Chicago, who were being forced to confess to crimes that they didn't commit,
right, and
being on death row, and that it was so many people that were found to be innocent on death row that was coming out of Chicago that the governor himself suspended executions, basically got rid of the death penalty at that time because of the corruption that was coming out of Chicago police. I think another thing that we can't overlook is that a lot of these police departments are hiring veterans who already have, who have just come back from combat zones.
Yep.
So these police departments are hiring these people who have been in combat zones, hiring them as police officers, and not putting forth the resources to deal with their mental health issues. Exactly. You know what I mean? Coming from a combat zone, coming to policing. So I think that trauma is one thing, but I also think that the environment, the culture, that surrounds a lot of these police departments are just sick, and it's very toxic, very toxic, and that toxicity I think is leading to some people to you know go that step of ending their own lives.
Yeah, and it is unfortunate, like you said, that there is, this is terrible for the families of these police officers. But what about the PTSD and the trauma of the people in the community who have to live under an occupying hostile police force that treats them like they're enemy combatants, and who have to live with situations like Holman Square and Chief John Burge, who had his own very long record of torturing and abusing black citizens using his police officers, and Laquan McDonald. People are recognizing the trauma that police officers experience, but who's recognizing the trauma that the people who the police officers are policing?
Well, you know what's trauma. What you know what's trauma that no one ever takes into account. The trauma that when a cop pulls up behind me, and the physical and the mental anguish I go through, even though I'm driving a vehicle that's legit, that's legal, paperwork is up to date, my license is up to date. I'm not anything that would get me locked up, but yet just the image of me looking in the mirror and seeing a cop behind me leads me through all types of mental anguish. Now, if now, where does that come from? Where does that come from? That people like me, black people like me, Hispanic people like me, can all see don't see the cop, don't see that cop in my rearview mirror as being friendly to me.
Right.
You know, when I look in my rearview mirror and see that cop, the first thing I say is, "Oh, what the hell is he going to do?" And he might not be paying me no mind, but because of the relationship we have with the police, that we continue to have with the police, we don't see that cop car in our rearview mirror as anything but a hostile, what they call it, enemy vehicle, enemy combatant. I mean, that's how we see it. You know, in fact, when a cop shows us some respect, we're like kind of shocked.
Yeah.
You know, like I was coming from work one time, and I forgot to turn my headlights on, and DC police officer put the lights on behind me and turned around, and you know, it was a female cop. And she said, you know, excuse me, sir. She said, you know, your lights are off. And I said, oh, I'm sorry. I said, I must have forgot to turn them on. You know, but I was like kind of shocked that, you know, we had that kind of exchange, you know. So, you know, the thing of it is that when we talk about trauma, when we talk about those things, we have to understand that, you know, that the trauma is also on our side too. And like I said, not to minimize or discount what's going on in these police departments, because they're human beings too. But what about the trauma they put us through?
Right.
On a daily basis.
Right.
You know, I mean, I could tell you a couple of incidences in my life where I've been stopped by the police unjustly, and after the police find out that, you know, I'm not who they're looking for, or I'm not this, I'm not that, I don't even get an apology.
Because, you know, we all fit the description.
Right. I don't even get an apology. I remember the police when I went to go pick my mother up from work, and the police harassed me, tore my car up and everything. And when they didn't find anything, they just left me in that state. Now that's trauma. You know what I mean? So when we talk about trauma, there's not a black man, especially not a black male, a black man who hasn't experienced some form of that in their lifetime. I mean, when you talk about black men of a certain age, at least once in our life we had that kind of we had that what they call that that experience with the police that didn't feel so good.
Yeah. I mean, I think we have to get to a point, and I one part of me feels hopeful that we are getting to a point where we are getting better at confronting white supremacy in this society and in this world. But a larger part of me also recognizes we're not there yet, because we're still having the same conversations with white people about why we need to have these conversations. And I mean, it's a I don't know that we will ever get there, but I know that we have to keep trying. We have to keep fighting.
Well, we look at our society, and our society is very toxic, and
Mm-hmm.
it's being felt in all throughout this nation, not just in the black areas, but when you have opiate crisis, when you have cops who are committing suicide,
Mm-hmm.
when you have mass shootings and stuff. These are all evidence of a society that is very toxic, that's very sick.
Yes.
People aren't allowed, working people don't have vacations like they used to. People can't afford vacations, they
Mm-hmm.
can't afford time off. We have a crappy medical, we have crappy healthcare system where people can't even get their mental health issues addressed.
Mm-hmm.
They can't get their physical conditions addressed. So we're just living in a society where people just don't matter, and I think that all of this stuff is being felt in the suicide rates, in the violence that we're seeing, in the amount of substance abuse that we're witnessing around us. All of these things, man, is just evidence of a society that is sick, that is toxic, and without us pushing for a better society, or as they say, that more perfect union, and electing those in power that can facilitate that, then we're going to just get sicker. As long
Mm-hmm.
as we leave it to the people who don't give a damn about us, as long as we keep electing those people, as long as we keep supporting those people, then guess what? This society is going to get much worse. It's going to get much sicker, and all of the manifestations of that sickness is just going to be. It's just going to get worse.
Got nothing to add to that. On that note, we thank you all very much for joining us tonight on Live and Coffee Current Events and Politics in Luqman Nation. We got a lot of work to do, y'all, and we are trying to do our part. If you really enjoy what we do here in Luqman Nation and all the stuff that's coming up that we can't even tell you about still, but we are working on stuff, consider supporting Luqman Nation through Patreon with monthly support, or through a one-time donation through PayPal and GoFundMe. You can find us on all three of those platforms under Luqman Nation, LuqMannation. Join us every Friday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Time now on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Hopefully next week we'll have better bandwidth and the CIA will stop messing with us. Probably not, but we're going to give it a shot anyway. Uh, Bless you. Look for us also on Sputnik Radio on Loud and Clear every Wednesday and Friday, airing Loud and Clear midweek roundup, and airs at 4, between 4 and 4:30, and the Weekend Review on Friday afternoons airs at 4, between 4 and 4:30. Listen to us every week then. Please continue to check out our page, Coffee Current Events and Politics in Luqman Nation, for national, international news about the black community. Stay tuned for some information about mobilizations that we are working on with the United National Anti-War Coalition and Black Alliance for Peace coming up in March. What else?
Share this video.
Yes.
Share it, share it, share it. Invite your friends. Let them know that we're here, that we're back. Like I said, we had a couple of weeks off, so some of you guys might have thought that we're not doing this anymore, but we are. But just share this video, man, and just only thing I can say is, Jackie, is that what you just said is that we really have a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
We can't sit on the sidelines, people, and think that this stuff is going to work itself out. No, we have to get our hands dirty, and that means, again, as we always say on Luke My Nation, that also means supporting those who do the work. This stuff is taxing, as you see. I mean, it's just the two of us, and I mean, we're tired.
Oh my God.
If you can see it in our faces, we're tired.
That's an understatement.
Right, but we continue to do this because we want to make a difference, and this is not for our own personal accolades or anything. We really appreciate you guys really supporting us, but this ain't about us. It's about those really who come after us. You know,
Oh
this
my
is
gosh.
what we're fighting for those who come after us. And if we could just make our corner of the world just a little bit better, well, maybe, damn it to hell, when we do finally go to our final resting place, we could take solace that we did try to do something.
So thanks so much for joining us, you all. Join us again next week on another edition of Live and Coffee Current Events and Politics in Luqman Nation. As always, be really good to each other. Peace.
I believe.